So before we start, let's create a simple bucket. Okay, I'm choosing this Mumbai region. For now, ACLs are disabled. I have to enable them because this topic is about ACL. Okay, enable. So we are not going to use policy, bucket policy this time. We are going to use access control list. Okay, like to control the access to the bucket and to the objects in it. Right? Block all public access. This should be disabled because we this will override, right? So if you block it, it will override your ACLs which are enabled, right? I will acknowledge it over here and I will click on create a bucket. So this will create my bucket with ACLs enabled. The other thing I have to do is I will just upload a file to this bucket. I'll take up this file and I'll upload it over here. Once it is uploaded, okay, now here the thing is I want to perform some operations on my bucket, right? So for example, like what are the common operations we generally perform on a bucket? Like we have seen till now, like you want to put the object on the bucket, you want to delete the object from the bucket, you want to put, delete, update the object on the bucket. See, actually, like we can say like you have a post, right? Post the object on the bucket. Put will also do your put object can also do your update operations. Okay. So if it is a new object, the key is unique, it will go and add a new object. If it is the unique, if the key is the same, it will override that object. And you want to get all objects, right? Get the object by key, and the fifth thing would be like list bucket, right? So you want to list all the objects in the bucket and all, right? So these are the 5 main operations which we can do using your ACL, right? But so here this is like a coarse grained, you don't have a lot of permissions which you can provide using your ACL, right? So ACLs can be applied at the bucket and the object level. Okay, so what all things you can do through your bucket, what all things you should apply to the bucket. So bucket ACL, like put object, okay, is part of your bucket ACL, which gives you permissions to basically, so if you say in bucket ACL you say write permission you are granting, right? That means they would be able to add objects to the bucket, right? Similarly here in the delete object, so that means they can delete objects from the bucket. Update the object means update the objects inside the bucket. Get the object by key. Now this is object level. Okay, so object ACL and you would need a read permission. Okay, and list bucket. This is for your bucket ACL and you would require a list permission, right? So here it is about like you have two type of, so when we talk about the access control list, these are the permissions you can grant. Okay, so and what permissions, like basically again when you are allowing the access through your ACLs, you can either apply the ACL permission to the bucket or to an object. So for your write operations, you are going to apply it to the bucket. For list operation, you will apply it to the bucket. But for the read operation, when you want to read a particular object, when you want to get a particular image from the server, you are going to apply it to that particular object, right? Now, these permissions can be granted to a grantee. Okay, so who can be the grantee? Bucket owner, which is by default. So as soon as you create a bucket owner has all the 3 permits. Okay, so he has this bucket ACL write permissions, he has object ACL read permissions, and he also has bucket ACL list permissions, right? So these are enabled by default. You don't have to do anything about it, right? So then is everyone. Everyone means all users. Okay. Okay. Then third is like all those who are authenticated users. Authenticated users means they have AWS account. Okay. The ones with AWS account. And the other is general is this, right? Everyone, all users. And the fourth one is cross accounts. Okay. Right. So everyone, like to the all users. Now if I go back to the UI, so if you go over here, this is the image I have uploaded. Let's go one by one. First, let me demo this to you. So if I have to allow put operations on a bucket, what I'll do, I'll go to the bucket on the permissions. I will go down and in the ACL, now put post operation. Whom do I want to allow out of these people? Bucket owner is already allowed, right? So do you want to all users be able to insert the data into the bucket? Now think about it, okay? If you grant in the bucket ACL, okay, your write permissions to everyone, what will happen? Like people can upload objects to your bucket. That means like they can, like someone else can keep saving the data into your repository, and who is going to pay for it? You are going to pay for it, right? So if I know you have, if you have shared your repository link to me and you have given me the right permission and I can insert as much data as I can, so what will happen? Basically you will be paying for that data, right? So it is not recommended. AWS says like you provide write permissions to everyone, all users, okay? So that is why if you look into this UI, okay, I'll go over here, I'll click on edit, and you see this write is actually not allowed from the console. Like everyone, okay, all users, they should not be given the write access, or all authenticated users should not be given the write access. You can do it if you want using your CLI SDK and all that, okay, but through the console you cannot do it, okay? So generally the write operation, what does it mean? Write permission means like anyone should be able to put the object, delete the object, or update the object in a bucket, right? List, what does it mean? List means to list the bucket, means list bucket objects, right? So this is about everyone, public access. So who all, so all the users, whether or not they are authenticated, be able to write or list the objects of the bucket. Authenticated user group, anyone with an AWS account. So like if I am the person, I have a valid AWS account, I be able to list the objects in the buckets. Now since this is only for authenticated users, so it becomes mandatory that the person who is making a request is also passing the authorization code as part of the request, right? S3 delivery log group. So basically like when we are using S3 for saving the logs, so basically we are providing permissions over here. Add grantee. Now if you want a particular account to be able to list or write to my bucket, what I can do is canonical ID is somewhat, it works like an account ID only. It is unique for a particular account, okay? So if you go to your security credentials, here inside the security credentials you will be able to see your canonical ID. So this is your canonical user ID. So this is my canonical user ID, but you can add the canonical ID for the other account whom you want to provide the list or the write permission, right? So this is about your ACLs, okay? Now the question comes, okay, but if I want to get a particular object by the key, how can I do that? So this is the object. What I need to do is I have to like select all the objects, and what I can do is actions, and I can say like make public using ACL. Once I do that, what is going to happen? If I go to that object permissions now, okay, so it would have provided a read permission to everyone, okay, because I have made it public, okay. If you don't want everyone to be able to access it, only the people who are authenticated, you can add it over here, like only these users should be able to have a read access, okay. But if you want access for other AWS accounts to be able to access it, then you can provide the canonical ID and provide the read permissions. So this is about it, right? So but currently, if you look over here, I will copy this object URL. So what we have done, we have provided this read permission to everyone. So if I go over here, if I paste the public URL, I should be able to access this image, right? So just a quick revision of what we learned. So it is your access control policy which we looked into, okay. It is a legacy mechanism of providing permissions. It is very, it can be attached to a bucket or an object. We have seen like when you are attaching a ACL to a bucket, or when to attach a ACL to an object. So if you want to read a particular object, you will attach a ACL to the object with the read permissions. for the grantee, right? And or if you want to do like write operation to a bucket, or you want to like list the bucket objects, then you can use it to a bucket. But it provides you a limited control. There are not much permissions which you can add over here. Only this limited set of permissions are there, right? There are some more like list bucket is what I have mentioned, like list multi-part upload and all those things are also there. Each bucket and object has an ACL attached to it. When you create a bucket or an object, it will create a default ACL like we talked about. So a resource owner will have all the permissions by default, right? You don't have to do anything, right? So we have looked into how you can provide permissions to the bucket owner, to everyone, all users, authenticated users, or to any particular account, right? Henceforth, we move to the next topic, that is static website hosting. So I'll actually delete this bucket, or I'll just delete the objects inside this bucket. So I will delete all the objects inside this bucket. Once I deleted the objects, I can, because I have attached ACL permissions and all, I will also delete this bucket, because for static website hosting, I'm going to use bucket policy only for the demo. Now you understand ACL, it is a legacy thing. You just need to understand how to do it. If you want a tutorial on it, I can do it in the next, like if there is a need for doing a static website hosting using your public ACLs, using your bucket ACLs or object ACL, you can ask me. I can create a video on that also, but it is as simple as anything. So here I'm creating a new bucket and I'm giving it some name, and I will say like create a bucket. Now this is about static website hosting. So as we talked about, so generally the web applications which are created using JavaScript, CSS, jQuery, HTML, and all these things, right? Like your WordPress websites, they can run on the browser. I'm not sure about the WordPress, but I think these applications which do not need a server, right? They can actually run on the browser, right? So for those websites, you do not need a web server. So those can be dumped on your S3 bucket, right? So this is the demo for it. For this demo, what you can do is you can actually go and you can search for any static website examples GitHub you can do. So you will get some static website example over here. So this is the example which I have downloaded for this demo. So like I'll open up the Visual Studio. So this is my static website. I have just created one example for you. This is just a static website for using index HTML pages, CSS and JavaScript, right? So what is going to happen? Currently, I have to so this is the HTML, CSS and JavaScript. Okay. So what am I going to do is I will actually dump all the files inside this bucket. So how can I do that? First of all, what you need to do is you need to connect. Here I'm doing it like what you can do is you can simply, go to this folder. Wherever your folder is, you can drag and drop all the files. But in this tutorial, I also wanted to show you how to connect through the CLI. So like this is my command prompt. What you have to do is you have to say AWS configure. Okay. And once you do that, you have to enter your access key and secret key. Okay, and the region, like I'm using Mumbai region. So AP South one is fine for me, and then this. So once I've logged in, I can do AWS S3 LS to see all my buckets. Okay, I can see this bucket which is created, right? Then what am I going to do is, now I want to copy all the files present in this location. Okay, I want to copy it over here. So what am I going to do? I can say AWS S3 copy, and I'll copy the location of this uh, folder. Okay, like all the files inside this, I have to copy it to my S3 bucket, right? So copy all the files from this folder to this S3 URI, and minus minus recursive means do it for all subfolders as well. I'll just execute this command. It will copy all the files in this folder, right? So if you look over here, this company.png I can delete. I just was doing it to find out the S3 URI. Okay, just to double check like whether it was S3 colon and double slash only. So I'll delete this company thing. So my website is now deployed on my S3 bucket, right? Now what I have to do to make it act as a static website hosting, right? To tell it AWS, okay, like this is the S3 bucket on which I've deployed my website, right? So what I have to do is I have to go to the properties, and inside this you can scroll down to static website hosting and you have to do enable, right? Host a static website. So what is your index document? Means your default landing page. I'm saying index.html. What is your error document? Now this depends upon the hierarchy of your files, how you have done it. So my landing page is index.html and my error page is inside the error folder and it is index.html like this, right? So with this, I will save the changes. So once it is done, and another thing which I need to do is I need to add permissions, right? So currently it is block public access on. So I have to unblock this public access so that they can read my files. Otherwise they won't be able to read it, right? And other than that, I will go and add a bucket policy which says like allow get objects for my S3 bucket. So here I'll select my S3 and I'll filter it by get object. Okay, so get object operation should be allowed. Okay, for what resource? This bucket, right? All the objects inside this bucket, right? And who all should be able to access it? Everyone. Because it is a website, right? Everyone should be able to access it. With this, I have added the permissions. I'll click on save changes. So now you can see, now if you go to the properties, you will see the endpoint over here. This is your bucket endpoint. If you select this and you open this up, your website should be hosted over here, right? So your website is running over here. You can click on these things and you should be able to access it. Okay, currently images are not coming up. I know why. I've deleted that folder. But other than that, everything is fine, right? So my website is running over here. So this is how you can actually enable your static website hosting, right? So what are the steps? Telling you just to reiterate, what are these steps? First of all, you create a bucket. Okay, then dump all your files, dump your project files, static web app files on the bucket. Okay, you can use this copy command. Then the third thing what you have to do is once you have dumped your files, you have to enable website hosting. And then what you have to do is after this is done, what you have to do is you have to grant public permissions, right? Grant public permissions, public read permissions, right? To all, to everyone, right? Then only they can go through your website, right? So this is how. So after this you will get a endpoint, website endpoint through which you can access your website, right? And when you are doing it, like when you are enabling your website hosting, it will ask you for some things like your index page, error page, those things you can specify, right? So this was about your how you can host your static website on the S3 bucket. Now once I have hosted the static website on the S3 bucket, we all know we can run into something which is called a CORS issue, right? So what is a CORS issue? So we all know what is happening. Like for example, like I have my website which is running on domain 1. Okay, and what is happening? Like it has to get the content from another domain, right? So for example, like it is making a request for JavaScript or your CSS files from another bucket or your image files from another bucket or another domain, right? So what is going to happen? So if it is a simple request, right? Now there comes the concept and course. I think we all know that, but still for those who are not aware of. So what is going to happen? Domain as in like here it is like www dot like here I have hosted my website, right? So what is the domain for this website? You can see it is giving http test 623, right? If I copy this, this is my domain, isn't it? So this is my domain for this particular website, right? Now suppose I create another S3 bucket and it is hosted on like the URL for that bucket. This test is what your bucket name only, right? So if I'm hosting it on my bucket, okay, some name, right? Some numbers, right? So now if I have one bucket which is hosting my website and the static images and all, it is getting it from some other bucket as well, right? So this, so what is going to happen? Like if it is becoming difficult over there. So suppose this is my browser, okay? So here you have opened up your web browser. You are using Internet Explorer. You type in the name of your website, okay? You type in over here like it is going to, you are making a request to this bucket, okay? You are telling it to open up this and index.html, right? You are making a request to this, right? So what will happen? This request will go to your server, your S3 bucket, okay, which we have created. Okay, so it is going to your S3 bucket and S3 bucket with the name. This is the name of your bucket, right? And it is looking up for your index.html, right? So it is looking up for your index.html. So S3 will reply back with index.html, right? So your S3 bucket will reply back with your index.html. But in that index.html, it is also using some. So this is your, like for example, this is your page it is returning, index.html, okay? And in this page, it is using your, it has a reference to the JavaScript, CSS images, which are lying on the other bucket, right? This, and which are lying on this another bucket. So what is the name of this bucket now? That is my bucket, and some name, right? So what will happen once the browser will get, it will try to render this page, it has to make a request to this bucket to get these resources. So it will try to make a request to this for these JS, CSS and images. But the thing is, since it is a different domain, right? So what will happen like this? Now what the browser will do is, it will see like what kind of a request I'm making for. Okay, so is it a simple text HTML text plain request? If it is a simple text plain request, or if it is a it is making a request. Now you know what is a content. Like simple request is when you're making a get head or post request. So the browser will see like, are you making a get request? Yes, I'm making a get request. Okay, are you making a request out of get head or post? Yes. So then you have headers like accept language, content language, and content type. If you are passing the content also as part of the request, see get request cannot have any content, isn't it? But in case you are making a post request, okay, and your content type is other than text plain, URL form encoded or multi-part form data. Okay, so then what it is going to do is, if it is like a simple get head post request and the headers are out of these, then it will consider it as a simple request. And simple request means what? Like simple request means like it will just make a request to the other domain. Browser will go, if it is a simple request, browser will go and make a request to the other domain and it will get back the response. Okay, so when it is making a request, it will actually pass in a header saying like the origin of this request. Okay, in the header it will say the origin of this request is test 6235, the name of this bucket. Okay, 672532. So browser is saying like I'm making a request on this behalf. Okay, and then it will like, this is a header which would be added and then it will get the response back, right? So this is in the case like if it is a simple request, okay, it has to make to the other domain. But if the request is not simple, as in like you are making a post request and this request has some content in it and to it you are saying content type as application JSON. Okay, so now this is not like a text plain, or it is not like your URL form encoded, a form URL encoded, or it is not like a form data, right? So it is none of these three. So what will happen if you are making a request, post request, and the content type is anything other than this, or you have something like authorization in your header, okay, or you have any header other than this, then the browser will not treat this as a simple request. So the browser will not go and just make a request on your behalf. So what the browser will do is it will actually, instead of making a request, so here what I'll do is I'll copy this and I'll paste it over here. So this was the example of your simple request. If it is a simple request, it can go and make a request like this. But in the case it is not a request, right? So what the browser will do over here. So for example, again, this is your browser, this is your S3 bucket 1, and this is your S3 bucket 2, right? So what will happen? First, the browser is making a request over here to basically get the content. It returns your index.html page, right? It is returning your index.html page. And then what will happen? Here another request. Now it sees, is the request, is it a simple request? No, it is not a simple request. Then if it is not a simple request, browser will not go and make a request on your behalf. What it will do, it will make a pre-flight request to this domain. Okay, so what is this pre-flight request? Pre-flight request as in, like before making the actual request, it will make a request with your options of type options. So in HTTP, you know, right, there are various kind of methods which are allowed, like get, put, post. Options is something which is just querying the server for what is allowed, okay, what kind of requests are allowed, okay, and it will pass in like what origin is the, what is the origin, and what are the headers, and what are the methods it is trying to make a request for. Then this server will basically response back, giving a response that whether it is allowed or no. Okay, so if it is allowed, then it will make a different request now with the actual request. Okay, what was the actual request? That was a post request. It was trying to make with the content type as application JSON, right? And some authorization header, right? If it says yes, it is allowed, okay, then it will make the actual request and then it will revert back with the response. So this is how it works, okay. So now for this pre-flight request, right, when this comes, this server should respond yes, it is allowed, okay, and how allowed or not allowed, right? So basically how it happens, you do it using your CORS, okay. CORS is like your cross origin resource sharing setting, okay. So for example, like I can do a demo first of all, okay. So I have to create these two buckets. This be like a test whatever bucket is already there, right, on which my website is hosted. So what is the name of this bucket? This is the bucket name on which my website is hosted, right? Then I need to create another bucket which will have only images, right? So I'll give some name to this bucket. Copy this name and I'll create a bucket with this name. So here I'll create a bucket and I'll try to give this name. So here we are. Now we have one bucket. So what am I trying to do is I'm trying to create a different bucket. So this is the bucket name which I want. I'll copy this bucket name. I'll create a bucket with the name images and 646378, 646378 and 46, right? Same Mumbai region I'm using, and I'll create this bucket, right? In this bucket, I'm going to export all my images, right? So this will have all the images. I'll select all these files. You can drag and you can drop them over here, and you can upload these files. So what I've done is I've moved all my images over here in this bucket. So if you go to the any image, so your URL for this image becomes this, right? So what I have to do is in my project, I have to go and I have to change it. So first of all, I'll delete this images folder, okay, because this is to the other folder, right? And what I'll do is, like, for the all the images I have, currently they have a URL like my bucket. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll replace this with this URL was wrong, that is why I was not able to get those images. Okay, so I'll just replace them with this. So once this is saved, I've done the changes which I wanted. So what is going to happen now? This is my final project which I want to deploy on my previous bucket, right? So I'll go to this test, and what I can do is I can select all and I can just delete all, right? I can say permanently delete. I want new files to be added over here. We can also overwrite, but I also wanted to delete that images folder. So that is why I'm doing that. So here I'll come here, I'll run the same command. Like anything which is in this folder, it has to be copied to this folder recursively. So this is done. If I'll refresh now, so this is done now. I can see all my files over here, right? I created this images folder, right? Images bucket. But what I have not done is I have not granted it public permissions, right? So I'll go and do that so that the other bucket can actually go and for these images. I'll confirm and I will edit this bucket policy and using a policy generator maybe this time. So I'll use S3 bucket policy, allow everyone to be able to do get object. On this particular bucket. I'll add the statement. I'll generate the policy. So this is the one. I'll paste it over here and save the changes. I'll just check whether my bucket is objects are publicly accessible now. So this, if I try to open this URL, it is accessible. So now if I just go to my website and I'll refresh, okay, you can see I can actually access these images. If I go to the network, I'll just refresh it once again. Hope it's not coming from the cache. So it is saying pic01.jpg. I don't have any such image, but if you see overlay.png, if you look at the request, it is going to images and it is able to get this request. Why is it able to get it? Basically, it is a very simple request. You are just making a simple get request, right? And there are no such headers like authentication or anything which is required right now, right? So that is why it is going to a different domain. How is it going to a different domain? If you look at your buckets, right? So this domain is like images 64637846, right? So both the buckets are from different domain, but it is able to, since it was a simple request, it was able to make a request and it was able to get it back. But now I'll change it a little. I will try to make a request to a file, okay, a CSV file from this bucket. Okay, so what will happen, like I will specify, okay, the accept is like you have to get a CSV file, right? And once I do that, basically what is going to happen, it will no longer be a simple request. Okay, so the content type for the request which is going to come back will become like a CSV format, right? So it won't be like a simple request, it will become a, so what will happen, like this request would be then blocked. So what am I going to do is, I'll show you what exactly I'm going to do over here. I will copy copy this code. This is a simple Ajax method which is trying to make a get request for CSV file. Okay, from this bucket. So from this images, okay, I'll copy this name. I'll just upload one CSV file over there. Okay, so here change it to this. Okay, so this is the and CSV file I need to upload. So here I'll go and I'll upload a CSV file. So, right. So once I've added this, so the name looks different. Okay. So what am I going to do is I'll copy this name Okay, and here I'll replace this one with this. Now I will copy this script. So it is making a get request to this bucket and it will try to parse and print out this CSV file. So here I'll add this in my index.html. I will add this somewhere. So in the main, this is my div CSV table. Here I would be displaying it. So in the head, I will add the script tag. So in the CSV table, it should be trying to display that CSV file. It is making a get request to this bucket to get that CSV file, images bucket to get the CSV file. Okay, it is asking for a CSV file. The request is no longer a simple request. It is asking for the data from the other bucket, right? So once it is done, now I will actually save this. I'll upload this thing to my, I'll upload this project. Now I can just run this like recursively just update everything. Whatever is there, it would have updated. I have saved it, right? Yeah. So I'll just do it once again in the case it was not updated. So now if I try to refresh, okay, there is a problem. I missed some syntax. 1 minute. There is a syntax problem. I forgot to close the script tag. I'll just paste it once again. I'll try to fetch it now. Let me see if it is able to get that data or no. 944. I think it is missing one more. So now let us see if it is able to get this data. I'll click on this button and what is it telling me? That this CSV has been blocked by cars, right? So you cannot basically access it directly. So what I need to do now in this images, what I have to do in this images, I have to tell it that it should be allowed. So if any request is coming from this particular server, allow it, right? So how can I do? I can go to the permissions and if I go down, I'll edit this course policy and basically I have to tell it what method it should allow. So we are making a request to a get request, right? We are making a get request right now and we are trying to get the CSV kind of a data, right? So, and what is the domain? We have to specify like what origin it should allow the request from. I have a specific CSV like this course JSON. We'll modify it, okay? So this is the default policy I have for course. So here it is a JSON which talks about like what should be the allowed headers. Every header, like currently I'm not blocking any header, allowed origin. So I'm saying like the request, any request coming from any origin. We have seen, right? So when it is making a request, it will say the request is coming from this origin, right? So what am I going to do is I'll go back to my buckets and I will specify that the request is coming from this origin, right? So I will say like if the request is coming from HTTP this, okay, or it is coming from HTTPS. I think I'm missing upon this thing. 1 minute. If I go to the, this is the bucket name, but if you look at the properties, your origin, like if you look at the endpoint, right? So this is your origin, right? So I'll copy the complete origin. So either this or even if it is your HTTPS, right? Any kind of a request which is coming. right? It should allow from these two. You can put a star also, which would say like any kind of a request. Currently head request, right? Or a get request or put post delete, any method I'm allowing, you can restrict it to only get or head or whatever method you want to allow, right? So this expose headers, right? So I'll save this change, must be a valid JSON. What went wrong? I have added one more bracket. I think this is not needed. Save the changes. So with this done, let me try to make a request again. Now you can see there was no error till now. I'll go to the console. I'll try to load the data and no error this time, right? And if you go to this file, it was loaded and you can see in the response that we have this. If you look at the response for this, you can see the data. So this was about the course. So just to reiterate what is happening in the course. So this is your browser making a request to this bucket, S3 bucket on which your website is hosted, right? So when your website is returning index.html page, it has some JavaScript and images or your CSS file, CSV file, which it is going to get from the other server, right? So this browser has to render this index.html. It has to make a request to the other server for these files. Now the browser, when it is will look at to the request, is it a simple request or is it not a simple request? If it is not a simple request, it will first make a pre-flight request that is of the type options. Okay, and it will say like this particular origin. The origin of the request is this, and whether you allow, whether this header is allowed or not. Okay, this get request for this particular origin is allowed with these headers or no. So then this has to reply yes, it is allowed or no. So how do you do that? You specify course policy. Once it will reply with yes, then the server will make another request with the actual request and it will respond with the data. So this is all about this. If you have any doubts or if you feel like something I have missed upon which you want me to cover or something needs any explanation, any questions, please you can add it as a comment. Thank you.